The Galactic Coalition Academy was the most prestigious military training center in the universe. Only the strongest, fastest, and smartest recruits were allowed to enter. Hundreds of different species had passed through its doors, each bringing their own unique abilities. Some had armored skin, others had extra limbs, and some could even breathe fire. Then, for the first time in history, a human arrived. Her name was Mira Holt, and the moment she stepped into the academy, the laughter began. The Drakari, a race of large reptilian warriors, snorted through their sharp teeth. One of them, a tall male named Korvax, flexed his thick arms and smirked. That tiny thing. That is the human. I have eaten meals bigger than her. The Vorthians, tall and multi-armed, exchanged amused glances. A female cadet named Tivan chuckled. She only has 2 arms. How is she supposed to hold a weapon and defend herself at the same time? The Kuris, insectoid creatures with sharp mandibles, clicked their jaws in amusement. Too slow, too weak, too soft, they whispered to each other. Even the instructors weren't impressed. Commander Duran, a veteran from the iron-skinned Selvar species, barely looked at Mira when she stood in line with the other recruits. "This will be a short experiment," he muttered under his breath. Mira heard everything. She saw the way they looked at her, like she didn't belong, like she was a joke. But she didn't say a word. She only adjusted the straps on her training uniform and stood up straight. She had one job: prove them wrong. The first test. The first day of training was simple, a basic strength test. The recruits had to push a heavy metal sled across the training ground. The Drakari did it effortlessly, their massive legs stomping across the floor as they pushed. The Vorthians used their multiple arms to gain extra leverage. Even the Kuris, though smaller, had strong exoskeletons that helped them move the weight. Then it was Mira's turn. She gritted her teeth and pushed. The sled barely moved. The laughter returned. "Pathetic," Gorvax sneered. Mira adjusted her stance and tried again. Her legs burned, her arms trembled, but she refused to stop. Inch by inch, the sled moved forward. The other recruits had finished in seconds. Mira took 4 minutes. By the time she crossed the finish line, sweat dripped from her face, and her muscles felt like they were on fire. But she did it. She finished. The next test was speed. The recruits had to complete an obstacle course filled with high jumps, swinging platforms, and narrow beams. The Vorthians flew through it with their extra limbs. The Kriss scuttled over obstacles with ease. The Drakari smashed through barriers without slowing down. Mira struggled. Her jumps weren't high enough. She had to climb instead of leap. She slipped on the narrow beams and had to catch herself before falling. But every time she failed, she got up and kept going. By the time she reached the end, she was covered in scrapes and bruises. The scoreboard flashed her result. Last place. More laughter. More whispers. Mira clenched her fists but didn't argue. She just looked at the course again, memorizing every section, every mistake. She would do better next time. The sparring match. The final event of the day was combat training. Each recruit had to fight another in a controlled match. Mira was paired with Tivan, the Vorthian with 4 arms. "Try not to cry, little human," Tivan teased, stepping into the ring. The fight began. Tivan moved fast, swinging 2 fists at once while keeping 2 more ready to block. Mira barely dodged the first strike, but the second caught her in the stomach. She gasped and stumbled back. Tivan didn't stop. She kept attacking, forcing Mira to retreat. The watching recruits chuckled. It looked like a game, one where the human had already lost. But then, something changed. Mira stopped retreating. Instead of trying to block all of Tivan's punches, she ducked under them and moved closer. She was smaller, lighter. She could dodge instead of block. Tivan swung again. Mira slipped past her defenses and landed a clean punch to her ribs. The impact wasn't strong, but it was precise. Tivan's smile faded. She attacked faster, using all 4 arms at once. But now, Mira wasn't just dodging. She was watching. She saw the patterns, the rhythm in Tivan's movements. When the next punch came, Mira twisted away and swept Tivan's legs out from under her. The Vorthian fell. The room went silent. Tivan scrambled to her feet, embarrassed. "That was luck," she muttered. Mira just nodded. Maybe. The first spark of respect. The day ended, and Mira was still the weakest, the slowest, the smallest. She had finished last in almost every test. But something had changed. The recruits still laughed, but now there was hesitation. The instructors still doubted her, but now they were watching more closely. And Mira, she didn't care about the scoreboard. She wasn't here to impress them on the first day. She was here to learn, adapt, and win. Tomorrow, she would be better. And one day, they wouldn't be laughing anymore. Mira Holt stood in the middle of the training hall, surrounded by recruits from across the galaxy. They were bigger than her, stronger, faster. At least, that's what they thought. The immovable gauntlet stood before her, a brutal obstacle course designed to break the spirit of cadets. No one had ever completed it, and now it was Mira's turn. The alien recruits whispered among themselves. "She won't last a minute. Humans are too weak for this. She'll fail like the rest." Mira ignored them. She tightened her gloves, took a deep breath, and stepped forward. The countdown began. 3, 2, 1, go. The impossible challenge begins. The first section of the gauntlet was a wall of shifting platforms. They moved unpredictably, designed to throw off anyone who hesitated. A reptilian cadet had attempted this challenge last week. He barely made it 2 platforms in before falling. Mira didn't hesitate. She studied the movement, analyzing the rhythm. Then she moved. Her foot landed on the first platform, then the next. She was light, fast, precise. The recruits gasped as she danced across the platforms like it was nothing. She reached the other side in under 10 seconds. The first section was complete, but that was the easy part. The wall of beasts. The next section had earned its name. 6 towering combat droids stood in a tight corridor, each one programmed to attack anything that moved. No weapons, no armor, just fists and instincts. A burly Vorthian recruit grinned. Now she's finished. Mira sized up the droids. They were tough, but they weren't smart. She took a step forward, and the first droid lunged. It swung a massive metal fist at her head. She ducked. The second droid kicked. She rolled under it. Mira didn't fight them head-on. That would be stupid. Instead, she used speed and strategy. She let them swing, let them strike, and she made them hit each other. A droid swung too hard. Crash! Its fist smashed into another droid's head. Mira slipped past them, untouched. By the time the droids recalibrated, she was already gone. The second section was complete. Now, only one challenge remained. The Titan's Ascent. A 30-foot vertical wall stood at the end of the gauntlet. No ropes, no ladders, just smooth, cold metal. It was impossible to climb. And yet, Mira had no doubt in her eyes. The recruits held their breath. She ran at full speed and jumped. Her fingers caught a tiny ridge, barely an inch deep. She swung her legs, using momentum to pull herself higher. The wall was designed to punish slow climbers. After 15 seconds, it would electrify the surface. Mira had no time to waste. She pushed off the wall, using her legs to jump higher. She grabbed another edge, then another. Her arms burned. Her muscles screamed. 5 seconds left. She lunged, fingertips grazing the final ledge. Then, with one last burst of strength, she pulled herself over the top. She had done it. VZZZT. The wall electrified, but Mira was already standing at the top. The gauntlet was over. The impossible was now possible. The moment of silence. The training hall was silent. No one spoke. No one cheered. They simply stared at Mira, the human girl who had done what no one else could. Even Commander Duran, who had trained thousands of warriors, looked impressed. Mira wiped sweat from her brow. Then she turned to the recruits below and smirked. That wasn't so hard. The silence broke. Murmurs, shock, a few voices in disbelief. She actually did it. No one's ever beaten the gauntlet before. A human. But then, one person clapped. It was Warger the Unbroken, the Academy's strongest warrior. His 4 powerful arms folded across his chest, his sharp eyes watching Mira closely. She is no ordinary human, he said. And with those words, everything changed. Respect earned. A rivalry begins. By nightfall, the entire Academy was talking about Mira Holt. She wasn't the weak human anymore. She was the record breaker, and not everyone was happy about it. The next morning, as she entered the training hall, Warger stepped forward. You proved yourself, he said, towering over her. But strength is not measured by obstacles. It is measured in battle. Mira raised an eyebrow. Are you challenging me? Warger grinned, revealing sharp teeth. I will see you in the arena. The recruits gasped. No one challenged Warger and walked away unbroken. Mira simply smiled. Good, she said. I was hoping for a real challenge. The Galactic Coalition Academy had never seen a human cadet before, and for the past 2 weeks, Mira Holt had been treated as a joke. The other recruits, Drakari, Vorthians, Kariss, and dozens of other alien species, laughed at her size, her strength, and her speed. She was always last in physical challenges, always struggling in endurance training, and always barely passing her combat drills. But Mira wasn't here to win on the first day. She was here to learn. She was watching. And today, that would change everything. The combat test begins. It was time for the combat simulation test, one of the toughest trials in the Academy. The recruits were placed in a battlefield simulation, a huge training dome filled with holographic enemies, moving platforms, and unpredictable terrain. The goal was simple: survive and eliminate as many targets as possible. The recruits were divided into teams. Mira's team had 4 cadets. Tivan, the Vorthian, who could fight with 4 arms at once. Gorvax, the Drakari, strong enough to crush boulders. Sirik, the Kariss, whose speed and reflexes made him almost untouchable. Mira, the human, who everyone expected to fail. The opposing team had elite recruits, including a massive Selvar commander in training. The simulation started, and the battle began. Mira's plan. As soon as the test started, the other 3 rushed into the fight. Gorvax charged forward, smashing through obstacles. Tivan fought 2 enemies at once, blocking and striking with perfect coordination. Sirik darted between enemies, striking weak points with deadly speed. Mira. She didn't rush in. She studied the battlefield. The simulation had holographic enemies, but their movements were based on real battle tactics. Mira watched how they reacted, how they flinched, how they dodged, how they attacked. And she realized something. The others were fighting harder, but she needed to fight smarter. The turning point. Gorvax knocked down 2 enemies, but then 3 more surrounded him. Tivan was holding her ground, but her 4 arms meant she couldn't dodge fast enough. Sirik was quick, but speed wouldn't help if the enemies trapped him. Their raw strength and speed weren't enough. But Mira had a plan. Gorvax, step left, she shouted. The Drakari hesitated, but moved. The moment he stepped left, one of the enemies missed an attack, stumbling forward. Gorvax took the chance and knocked it out instantly. Mira turned to Tivan. Use your top arms to defend, and the lower ones to attack from below. Tivan frowned but tried it. Suddenly, her defense doubled, and she counterattacked faster. Sirik was next. Mira pointed at the walls. Use the walls to bounce and attack from above. Sirik clicked his mandibles but followed her advice. He leaped onto a nearby wall, kicked off, and landed on an enemy's head, taking them down instantly. Within minutes, Mira wasn't just surviving, she was leading. Breaking the simulation. The instructors watching from the control room were shocked. Commander Duran narrowed his eyes. The human is adapting. No one had ever fought like this before. Other recruits relied on their natural strengths. But Mira was using everything. Strategy, positioning, enemy weaknesses, and teamwork. She wasn't the strongest. She wasn't the fastest. But she was winning. More enemies came. Mira anticipated their attacks before they even happened. She dodged at the last second, tricked enemies into hitting each other, and found patterns in their movements. The other recruits followed her lead. The battlefield became a trap, but not for Mira's team. It was a trap for the enemies. The unbelievable victory. 30 minutes later, the test ended. The simulation shut down. The results appeared on the screen. Mira's team had the highest score in Academy history. A long silence filled the training hall. The recruits who had mocked her didn't laugh this time. Gorvax, who had insulted her strength, grunted in approval. Tivan, who thought she was too slow, gave her a curious look. Sirik, who had ignored her before, nodded once. And the instructors? They were no longer ignoring the human cadet. The first crack in their confidence. Mira sat on the bench, catching her breath. Sweat dripped down her forehead. But she felt something new, satisfaction. She hadn't just survived. She had proved something today. For the first time, the other recruits weren't just looking at her. They were looking to her. And this was only the beginning. For weeks, Mira Holt had been the weakest recruit at the Galactic Coalition Academy. The other cadets had mocked her. The instructors had doubted her. But after the combat simulation test, everything changed. She wasn't the strongest. She wasn't the fastest. But she had outsmarted the battlefield. Now, the recruits who once laughed at her watched her closely. Some respected her. Others still believed her success was just luck. And Commander Duran, he wasn't convinced yet. That's why he made a decision. Mira would face the toughest challenge in the Academy. The immovable gauntlet. The ultimate test. The immovable gauntlet was a combat simulation so difficult that no recruit had ever completed it. It was designed to break warriors, to push them to their absolute limits. Even the strongest Drakari had failed. Even the fastest Vorthians had collapsed. Now, a human was going to try. The moment Mira's name appeared on the announcement board, the Academy erupted with whispers. She won't last 5 minutes. She's good, but not that good. Commander Duran just wants to prove she's still weak. Mira ignored the talk. She simply tightened her gloves and prepared herself. She wouldn't break. Not today. Into the gauntlet. The simulation started. The battlefield around Mira shifted. The walls moved. Platforms rose and fell, and the floor became unstable. Then the enemies arrived. The first wave was basic drones, metal warriors with simple attack patterns. Mira dodged and countered effortlessly. The second wave was energy-shielded mechs, tougher and more aggressive. Mira studied their weaknesses, targeting the joints and energy cores. The third wave. Selvarian berserkers, programmed to fight like real warriors. They surrounded her, attacking from all sides. Mira moved faster. She wasn't strong enough to block their attacks, so she didn't. She redirected their force, making them hit each other instead. Every step, every movement, it was all precise. She wasn't fighting with brute force. She was fighting with human adaptability. The test gets harder. 10 minutes passed. 15 minutes. The watching recruits started shifting uncomfortably. She should be tired by now. No one has lasted this long. Commander Duran folded his arms. His eyes narrowed. Mira was still fighting. The simulation increased difficulty. Enemies moved faster. Obstacles became deadlier. The battlefield kept changing. The gauntlet was designed so that no recruit could keep up. But Mira was adapting in real time. She changed her movements with every shift in terrain. She figured out enemy attack patterns within seconds. She wasn't just surviving. She was winning. The final wave, the unbeatable opponent. After 30 minutes, the simulation threw everything at her. And Elite Warbeast, a towering holographic creature, stepped forward. It was 20 feet tall, covered in thick armor, and had a plasma cannon on its shoulder. Every recruit had fallen at this stage. The Warbeast charged at Mira, faster than something that size should have been. She dodged at the last second, barely avoiding its massive claws. The Warbeast fired its plasma cannon. Mira jumped behind cover as the ground exploded. For a moment, she stood still. The recruits thought she was trapped. But Mira was calculating. Every enemy had a weakness. She just had to find it. The smartest victory. Mira ran straight toward the Warbeast. The recruits gasped. She's lost her mind. She can't take that thing head-on. The Warbeast swung its massive arm. At the last second, Mira slid under it, dodging perfectly. Then she jumped onto its back. The Warbeast roared, trying to shake her off. Mira climbed higher, reaching its plasma cannon. One weakness. That's all she needed. She ripped open a small maintenance panel. Inside, she saw exposed energy wires, a flaw in the simulation's design. She grabbed a loose power cell from her belt and jammed it inside. The plasma cannon overloaded. The Warbeast staggered. Mira jumped off just before the massive enemy collapsed in a smoking heap. The Academy falls silent. The simulation ended. A loud beep filled the training hall. Mira landed, breathing hard, sweat dripping down her face. The screen flashed the results. First human cadet. First recruit to ever complete the immovable gauntlet. The room went silent. No one laughed. No one whispered. No one mocked her anymore. Commander Durand stared at the screen. Then, slowly, he stepped forward and looked directly at Mira. His voice was calm, but there was a new tone of respect in it. "No recruit has ever beaten the gauntlet," he said, "until now." Mira wiped the sweat from her forehead and shrugged. "I guess humans are full of surprises," she said. The legend begins. From that moment on, Mira wasn't just another cadet. She wasn't a joke. She was a legend in the making. Recruits who once ignored her now wanted to train with her. Instructors who once doubted her now watched her closely. Commander Durand didn't say it out loud, but everyone could see it. The human rookie had earned his respect. And this was only the beginning. Mira Holt had done the impossible. She had beaten the immovable gauntlet, a test that no other recruit had ever completed. The Academy was still in shock. No one mocked her anymore. No one called her weak. But not everyone was ready to accept a human as the best, especially Commander Durand. He had watched Mira's progress, seen her victories. She was skilled, but skill wasn't everything. Strength mattered. Speed mattered. Raw power mattered. And humans, they didn't have any of those. That's why he made a decision. Mira had one more test to pass. And this time, there would be no strategy, no tricks, no second chances. A duel like no other. The next morning, a new announcement flashed across the Academy screens. KDT Mira Holt versus WarGard Unbroken. Official combat trial. The Academy exploded with excitement. Wargar was the strongest warrior in training. A Drakari built like a tank, standing over 7 feet tall, his body covered in thick armored scales. He had never lost a fight. And now, Mira was challenging him. Some recruits thought it was a mistake. She's smart, but this is a real fight. Wargar is a monster in the ring. She can't win this. No way. But Mira? She just smiled and tightened her gloves. The arena fills. The combat ring was packed. Every recruit, every instructor, and even high-ranking officers came to watch. Mira stepped into the ring, her heartbeat steady. Across from her, Warger cracked his massive knuckles, his claws gleaming. He looked down at her and grinned. "This won't take long," he rumbled. Mira just shrugged. "We'll see." Commander Duran raised his hand. "Begin. Brains versus brawn." Warger charge. Mira had seen him fight before. His style was simple: overpower, crush, dominate. He swung a massive fist. Mira dodged. Barely. The wind from his punch rushed past her face. If that hit landed, she was done. Warger didn't slow down. He threw another punch, then another, each one faster than the last. Mira weaved through them, staying just out of reach. The crowd watched in awe. Warger was stronger, but Mira was faster, and she was thinking. A fight of endurance. Minutes passed. Warger kept attacking. Mira kept dodging. She wasn't landing any hits, but she didn't need to, because Warger was getting tired. Prakari warriors had power, but they burned energy fast. And Mira, she was built for endurance. She had trained for this, outlasting stronger opponents. Warger growled. His movements slowed, just a little. Mira saw her chance. The turning point. For the first time in the fight, Mira attacked. She darted in and struck Warger's ribs, a weak spot between his armored scales. He staggered. The crowd gasped. Warger swung wildly, but Mira was already gone. She struck again, his knee joint. Warger dropped to one knee, his breathing heavy. He tried to get up, tried to grab her. But Mira was too fast. One final strike, straight to his temple, and the unbeatable warrior fell. The academy stands in shock. Silence. No one spoke. No one moved. Commander Duran's eyes narrowed. Mira Holt, a human, had just defeated the strongest fighter in the academy. Then, the arena erupted. Some recruits cheered. Others stared in disbelief. Mira stepped back, breathing hard. She looked down at Warger, who groaned and opened one eye. He chuckled. That was unexpected. She grinned. "I get that a lot." Respect earned. Commander Duran walked into the ring. He stopped in front of Mira, studying her. Finally, he nodded. "Cadet Holt," he said, "you have proven your strength, your skill, and your intelligence." He raised his voice. "This academy exists to train the best warriors in the galaxy, and today you have earned your place among them." The recruits clapped. Even those who doubted her nodded in respect. Mira had come to the academy as a joke. Now she was a champion, and this was still just the beginning. Mira Holt had done the impossible twice. First, she had beaten the immovable gauntlet, a test no cadet had ever completed. Then, she had defeated Warger the Unbroken, the strongest fighter in the academy. Now, no one doubted her anymore, but respect came with a price. She wasn't just another cadet now. She was the one to beat, and someone was waiting for her next challenge. A new threat rises. A week after Mira's victory against Warger, the academy received an unexpected visit. A team of elite soldiers arrived, the Black Talons. They were an advanced strike unit, trained for high-risk missions across the galaxy. Every recruit at the academy dreamed of joining them. But only the best of the best ever got the chance. Their leader, Captain Veros, was a towering Vorthian with piercing yellow eyes and a scar across his cheek. He stepped forward, scanning the recruits like a predator searching for prey. Then his eyes locked on Mira. "So," he said, voice cold and sharp, "you're the human everyone is talking about." Mira met his gaze without flinching. "That's me. I've heard the stories," Captain Veros said, "but I don't believe in stories." He crossed his arms. "I want to see for myself. The challenge of the Black Talons." Commander Duran stepped forward. "Captain Veros, what are you suggesting?" Veros smirked. "A real test, not a simulation. Not a duel. A mission. The recruits murmured in shock. An actual mission. That was unheard of for cadets. Commander Durand frowned. She is still in training. She is more than ready, Veros said. Unless you think her victories were luck. Mira saw Durand's jaw tighten. He didn't like Veros, that was clear. But more than that, he didn't like anyone questioning his academy's best cadet. Finally, he nodded. Very well. What is the mission? Veros turned to Mira. There's a Black Talon training ground on a remote moon, he said. It's designed to prepare soldiers for real combat. No rules. No safety nets. He leaned in slightly. You will have 1 hour to complete an extraction mission inside the training facility. If you succeed, I will admit that humans have earned their place in the Coalition's elite forces. Mira took a breath. This wasn't just about proving herself. This was about proving humanity itself. She nodded. I accept. Into the fire. The next day, Mira was suited up and standing at the edge of a massive drop pod. The training moon below was covered in dark forests and abandoned military ruins. Her mission was simple: infiltrate the base, retrieve a classified data core, and escape. But there was a catch. The Black Talons had set up defenses. Elite soldiers would be patrolling the facility. Automated turrets and traps were in place. This was a real battlefield. Commander Durand stood beside her. This isn't a test, cadet. This is survival. Mira smirked. Good. I hate easy tests. The drop pod doors slammed shut, and the countdown began. 3, 2, 1. The pod launched. Mira felt her stomach drop as she rocketed toward the moon below. The mission had begun. Stealth and strategy. The pod crashed down in the dense forest. Mira jumped out, keeping low. Her helmet scanner showed enemy patrols all around the facility. If she rushed in, she'd be caught instantly. So she did what humans did best. She adapted. Instead of fighting her way through, Mira used the environment. She moved silently, avoiding open paths. She climbed onto rooftops, watching enemy movements before making her next move. She waited for the right moment before slipping past the guards. Her agility and intelligence were her biggest weapons. After 30 minutes, she reached the main control room. The data core was inside. But there was a problem. The final obstacle. Inside the room stood a single soldier. Not just any soldier. A Black Talon elite, one of Veros's best. His armor was reinforced, and his movements were sharp and calculated. Mira knew she couldn't fight him head-on, but she didn't need to. She spotted a loose power conduit above him. Carefully, she crept up the wall and dislodged the panel. The conduit sparked, and suddenly the lights flickered. The soldier turned in confusion. That was all Mira needed. She dropped down silently, grabbed the data core, and disappeared into the shadows before he even knew she was there. Escape and victory. Mira sprinted toward the extraction point. Alarms blared behind her. The Black Talons knew someone was inside. A group of soldiers chased after her, weapons ready. Mira ran as fast as she could, dodging gunfire and leaping over obstacles. At the last second, she reached the extraction beacon. A ship swooped down, her ride home. She jumped on board, and the doors slammed shut just as enemy bullets bounced off the hull. She had won. Respect earned. Back at the academy, Mira stepped out of the ship and walked straight to Captain Veros. She tossed the data core to him. "See for yourself," she said. Veros caught it, his expression unreadable. Then, after a long moment, he nodded. "You're good, Holt," he admitted. "Better than I expected." He turned to Commander Durand. "You were right," he said. "This human isn't just lucky. She's one of the best." The academy erupted in cheers. Mira had proven herself once again. But this time, it wasn't just a victory. This time, she had proven that humans could stand among the strongest warriors in the galaxy. And Mira, she was just getting started. Mira Holt had done it all. She had beaten the immovable gauntlet. She had defeated Warger the Unbroken in combat. She had completed a Black Talon mission, something no cadet had ever attempted. Now she stood at the top of the academy. And yet, her journey wasn't over. Because one final test remained. The ultimate trial. Commander Duran called Mira to his office the day after her mission. She entered, standing tall. Duran studied her for a moment. Then he placed a small data pad on the table. "This," he said, "is your next challenge." Mira glanced at the screen. Her eyes widened. It wasn't another simulation. It wasn't a training fight. It was a real mission. "You've proven yourself," Duran continued. "But to become a true warrior, you must do more than survive. You must protect." Mira frowned. Protect what? Duran's expression hardened. A colony under attack. Mira's breath caught. This was real. A call for help. The mission was urgent. A human colony on the planet Vashtar 4 had sent a distress signal. Unknown enemies were raiding their settlement, taking supplies, capturing people. No military reinforcements would arrive in time. The only ones close enough to help. Mira and a small team of elite cadets. It wasn't a test. It was life or death. And Mira knew what she had to do. Landing on Vashtar 4, the shuttle touched down on the burning colony. Smoke filled the air. Buildings were destroyed. The sky was dark with storm clouds. Mira led her team forward, weapons ready. They weren't fighting in an arena anymore. This was war. The enemy revealed. A scream echoed from the ruins. Mira and her team rushed forward. They saw a group of alien raiders, large, armored creatures with glowing red eyes. They were loading human prisoners onto their transport ships. Mira clenched her fists. She wouldn't let this happen. She turned to her team. "We take them now." No hesitation. Battle begins. Mira charged forward, leading the attack. The first raider turned. Too slow. Mira's kick sent him crashing into a wall. Her teammates followed, weapons firing. Energy blasts lit up the battlefield. Mira ducked behind cover, scanning the fight. The raiders were strong, but Mira had something they didn't. A plan. Tactics and triumph. Instead of fighting head-on, Mira used strategy. She targeted weak points in the raiders' armor. She coordinated her team, directing their fire. She outmaneuvered the enemy, forcing them into tight spaces. One by one, the raiders fell. The last ship tried to take off, escaping with the prisoners. Mira didn't think. She acted. She sprinted forward, leaped onto the ship's ramp, and climbed inside. A duel in the sky. Inside the ship, the leader of the raiders stood waiting. He was massive, easily twice Mira's size. "You should not be here, human," he growled. Mira cracked her knuckles. That's what they all say. The ship lifted off. Mira had seconds to win this fight. The raider swung, fast and powerful. Mira dodged, rolled, and struck behind his knee. He stumbled. She grabbed a metal pipe and slammed it into his side. The raider roared and lunged, too slow. Mira twisted behind him, grabbed his weapon, and turned it against him. A single blast. And the raider fell, saving the colonists. Mira rushed to the ship's controls. She had never flown a raider ship before, but that didn't matter. She grabbed the controls and forced the ship to turn back. The enemy on the ground watched in shock as their own transport landed. The doors opened, and the human prisoners ran free. The colony was saved. The return. Back at the academy, Mira stood before Commander Duran and Captain Veros. She had expected a speech, a formal recognition. Instead, Duran just nodded. "You did well." Veros smirked. "Better than well. You proved that humans are more than just survivors." Mira tilted her head. "And what's that?" Veros's smirk faded. They're warriors. Mira Holt. The legend begins. The Academy knew her name now. Not as a weak recruit, not as a lucky cadet, but as a warrior who had earned her place. Mira had come to the Academy as an outsider. Now she was a legend in the making. And she was just getting started.